And P.J. Jones, the pole sitter, comes through the inner loop at the end of the back straightaway.
I always saw my future, it was in IndyCar.
P.J. Jones sits in the cockpit of Dan Gurney's number 98. He's making his IndyCar debut.
And it was a great honor. I mean, I was jumped at the opportunity. Here, I'm going to drive for Toyota. I'm going to drive for Dan Gurney.
Well, here's a guy that's having a terrific day. There is the Eagle, and it's P.J. Jones as he's up in 11th place.
You know, that was nice. That was, something that I can always say. I scored the very first points for Toyota in IndyCar, and that was tough. That was a definite victory at that time.
Juan Fangio, I believe, has a huge fire at the back of his radar.
Every race we went to, we were asking where the fire stations were, so we knew where to pull over if something went wrong.
They have stopped the cars well down the course while they make an attempt to service as best they can the situation involving Jeff Krosnoff.
It was like a bomb went off. I mean, there was stuff everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, this is not good.
And there are the two All-American racers, Toyota-powered machines, P.J. Jones on the right, Alex Barrett on the left.
And I enjoyed my days with Toyota. The beginning part more than the end part.
PJ tries to keep it low coming through turn one. The back end snaps around. PJ clutches it, keeps it running, and gets back into the fight.
Trying to catch Montoya, there was good after I spun in traffic.
Some PJ stays high to maximize his speed, goes side by side with Montoya, and he's telling young Juan, hey, I'm for real, pal.
I always tell somebody, if I'm going to start a race team these days, I would start an IndyCar team. That's where my heart is.
All right, welcome to Open Wheel Rewind. I'm your host, Ryan Nothhaft, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by P.J. Jones, a man that has a tremendous resume in American racing, from IMSA, IndyCar, and all forms of NASCAR, and he's found success at every level. So, P.J., I'm really thrilled and honored that you're making a couple minutes here to chat with us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Open Wheel Rewind. So, I mean, if we were going to do a proper interview with you, it'd be much longer because of your tremendous career. But we're going to focus only on the open wheel part, the IndyCar part, if you will.
Yeah.
Before we hop into that, I was actually curious if you still watch the current IndyCar product today. And if so, what do you think about it?
I do. I think that's my favorite form of motorsports. I mean, I like all motorsports. So I watch, a variety of different things, but IndyCar is definitely my favorite. I still have a lot of friends over there, and throughout the garage and in IndyCar. So, and really, to be honest, they're putting on great races. The racing's exciting right now. Obviously, I'd like to see maybe a little more modern car and things like that. But man, you watch the last race at. Where were they last at? You watch Detroit, and then you watch St. Louis, and I mean those were great races. I mean they had a lot of excitement in them, and hopefully we can get the ovals. Other than Indy 500, hopefully they can get the attendance up in the ovals and like Milwaukee and some of the other places that we've raced.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, you brought up the car, and I was going to ask you, I think a lot of people want to see a new car, but one of the things that's really changed since your time racing is specifically that aero screen and safety. And you mentioned St. Louis, Joseph Newgarden, pretty much unscathed through what was otherwise a terrible wreck. What's your thought on the aero screen and the safety of the cars?
Well, I think it's a great thing. I mean, to have the drivers protected like that. I mean, I hate to see it from the nostalgic side of it, and what IndyCar's always been, but the cars are too fast. Maybe if we had those back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was running, maybe we would not have lost a few drivers. But it's a really good thing. I think that's is a great improvement.
Gotcha. Well, let's transition to your career. And again, we're going to focus on the open wheel part of it. But before you even got to IndyCar in 1996, I mean, you had, I think, about a decade's worth of racing, different disciplines, and you found tremendous success, especially in IMSA and some different forms in NASCAR. What was really the catalyst for you to, having that success, then to switch over to IndyCar in 1996?
I always saw my future, it was in IndyCar. And that's what I want to do. Ever since I was a kid, I mean, I was born April 23rd, and I was at the Indy 500. 3 weeks later. And I, there's pictures of me floating around in the Borg Warner Trophy when I was 3 weeks old. We had the same 2 hotel rooms at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, all the way up until it was destroyed, just demolished. So IndyCar was always in my, future as far as I thought. And I just, it was, coming from an open wheel family, my dad's history is like, I want to do IndyCar. From my size standpoint, I'm 6 foot tall. I trained really hard. I tried to get myself as lean and light as I could, but the best I could do is like 180. So I always gave everybody about 20 pounds, me, Paul, Max, Robbie, we were all, on the heavier side, bigger side of drivers. Then you get the Europeans that come over and are much smaller. So that was a big disadvantage, is my size, my weight. And we jumped up and down and begged IndyCar to weigh the drivers in the cars together, which they didn't do until later on. Um, but so that was just when I started driving. When I got out of Indy Lights, I was or I was still in Indy Lights, and I was asked to drive a Toyota sedan. It was a factory program, and in Firestone Firehawk, and so I went and did that with Dennis Ossie, and we just had so much fun. Dennis Ossie, Chris Cord, John Morton, Chip Hanauer, and we just had a blast. And so we were doing that, and the Gurney's team was on the verge of it looked like the new car was doing really well. They were looking for another driver. Toyota liked me, and they kind of they did a little bit of there was a test, actually, kind of a constructed test. If Toyota ever presented something to Dan, he would go the opposite direction, and Toyota wanted me in the GTP car. So they kind of planned a test where we were going to run the Firehawk car at the same test that the GTP car was running. And then they got to get Dan in one of those cars, and I raced him. We went back and forth, and about a week later, I get a phone call. Hey, would you be interested in driving the GTP car? And I've known Dan, at that point, I'd known Dan my whole life, obviously with my dad and all that. So, and it was a great honor. I mean, I was jumped at the opportunity. I'm going to drive for Toyota. I'm going to drive for Dan Gurney in that operation. And I couldn't have had a better teammate in Juan Manuel Fangio. So that's kind of how it all started with Gurney. And then obviously our success in GTP and winning 24 hours and winning 17 between Juan and I, 17 in a row. And then we kind of killed the series. So Toyota was looking to go IndyCar racing, and so that was kind of my jump into IndyCar, and I saw it as my opportunity. Hey, have factory backing of a great manufacturer, be with somebody like Dan Gurney, and move right into IndyCar.
Yeah, it makes total sense. But with Toyota being a new manufacturer to IndyCar specifically for that 96 season, I think Dan Gurney had the Eagle chassis, so kind of its own in-house chassis, and then I think you guys were running Goodyear tires. Obviously, I think you guys knew that winning races probably wasn't realistic for that 96 season, and I'm just saying that as an outsider looking in retrospect. What were the goals for your 96 season? Was it to finish as many races as possible, to gain valuable knowledge for the evolution of the engine? Like, what were your goals going into
Well,
that
yeah,
96
I mean,
season?
we knew 96 wasn't going to be, that successful. We just didn't know it was going to be that bad. I mean, Juan and I were definitely in the penalty box. Like you said, we had Goodyear tires. The Firestone was dominating. The motor, we were struggling. I mean, we were 100 horsepower down. They were blowing up. I mean, every time we went somewhere, every race we went to, we were asking where the fire stations were. So we knew where to pull over if something went wrong. And the chassis, that was Dan's first crack at it. And I think that was probably the easiest, it sounds funny, the easiest thing to solve. It was the chassis because he was already working on another one. But then, when you're successful, like we were in GTP, you know, everybody's on this high, everybody's getting along, everybody is, you know, on the up and up, and all of a sudden, you know, you go through a couple years of no success, or you know, very small successes, and the motors are blowing up and the cars are catching on fire, and we're way down on downforce, we're way down on horsepower, and we don't have the right tire. You know, personalities change, and unfortunately, you know, I stuck it out till through 98, and I just I couldn't do it anymore, and it was getting frustrating, and I think Toyota and Dan were getting, you know, they were button heads, and I could just see the writing on the wall that, hey, this is not going to last. Something here is going to break. And so I got asked to drive for Patrick Racing, and so I jumped ship. I had a couple of other offers prior to that I was not really ready to jump ship. And I really wanted to stick it out with Toyota and Dan and all that. And you know, and then with Patrick, you know, I jumped out of the pan into the fire because it wasn't any better over there. And they wanted to put me in Swift, you know, us in Swift chassis, and they were at the end of their run as well. So probably wasn't a good move on my part to move over to that organization.
Yeah, I've got so many questions, and I'll follow up on almost everything you just talked about. Want to rewind? Actually, I have a question about your first race. I believe in IndyCar was actually round 7 versus in Milwaukee versus the first round in Homestead. Was there a reason that you started at the 7th round of the season in '96 versus at the start of the season?
I think they just couldn't supply enough motors, you know. You know, I don't ever felt like I was, you know, treated differently, you know, with Juan. Juan and I were like best of friends. I mean, we couldn't, like I said, I couldn't have had a better teammate, but we couldn't keep the motor together. And I think they, instead of having, you know, 2 disasters, they wanted to have one, and they couldn't supply enough engines. And so we just waited with my car in order to get, and I can't remember if the chassis was a little bit behind, as might have been, because I think we jumped right into Eagle chassis. So I think my car might have been a little bit behind, but we were just struggling. I mean, it was just, you know, we're trying to do everything we can. We had a really good group over there with John Ward, Jim Hamilton. Jim Hamilton's a Ganassi now. John Ward, I'm not sure what he's doing now, but he's been all over the place. I mean, designing the cars. We had a great aerodynamicist, and I mean, we really had a lot of good people, and I felt like we could have conquered it if we would have had the money behind it, and the time to do it.
Yeah, they're definitely iconic cars. Sticking on Milwaukee, yeah, as your first race, do you remember that weekend? I think it was a bit chaotic in that I think qualifying was rained out on Saturday, so you actually got, I think, probably minimal practice time. And then your father, Parnelli Jones, that you've referenced there, he actually drove the pace laps for your first race. Do you have special memories from that first race?
Yeah,
I mean,
not a lot. You know, I do remember that. You know, I think we were so focused on you know, the car and the team, and you know, trying to develop a chassis that sometimes, you know, when things like that go on, and you're not having those success, it's all into a blur. You know, your memories in a blur. You're like, I just want to forget those years because it was tough. And then you know, not to mention, in 94, my brother got hurt, right? On top of all that. So, you know, really seriously injured at Eldora, at the Four Crown in a sprint car. And you know, so our family was, there was a lot of things going on internally, you know, trying to get him better, and you know, just coming to the adjustment, hey, he may never get better. And so I think, you know, you know, 10 years or 5-year period of IndyCar, it was, especially at the beginning, was a little bit of a blur and, you know, not having success. I mean, we did have some small, I got the first points for Toyota at Long Beach. I think it was in the rain. And there was some
is
things.
Detroit? I think it's your second race, Detroit.
Was it Detroit? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you scored a ninth, and I was going to. That was my next
That's right.
question,
That's right.
actually.
It was Detroit. Yeah.
Yeah. Your second race and you got 9th, so it showed some moments of,
Yeah, right.
promise, right?
Yeah, it showed that, hey, we deserve to be out here. We're not. Um, we're just not. They can find us in an alley somewhere and put us in an IndyCar. But yeah, and that was nice. And obviously you feel great, and then you go to the next race and you're back to in the 20s. So or you don't finish. So it's that was nice. That was something that I can always say. I scored the very first points for Toyota in IndyCar, and that was tough. That was a definite victory at that time. That having being over 100 horsepower short probably really helped that situation, being slick and in the rain. Um, but like I said, it wasn't all bad. I had I really cherished the years I had with Gurney in those days, and especially when we were winning. And and the team was amazing, right out of Santa Ana. And I'm a West Coast guy, so I was living in California. I could go down to the shop every day and kind of see what's going on, and not every day, but I could go right down there and hang out. I'm more technical. I like the technical side of it. So that was a lot of fun, and the GDP car those days were amazing, and so I really did enjoy that part of it. I enjoyed my days with Toyota, the beginning part more than the end part, but um it was challenging in the IndyCar days.
Yeah. Can I ask you about probably one of the more challenging days of your IndyCar career for everyone that raced in Toronto in 1996? You guys lost Jeff Krosnoff in a terrible accident at the end of the race there. He was a Toyota teammate of yours, so I wanted to kind of get insight into how close were you with Jeff and the ending of that race. You guys ended on the backstretch there, and just if you have any memory of just kind of what was your initial thought process of what's going on here?
Yeah, I wasn't overly close with Jeff. I mean, we obviously did a lot of functions together and this and that, and he was a good guy. I mean, he was friendly, and I think we would have became much better friends if we would have got to know each other a little bit better. Um, but I remember I got there not too long after that accident happened. I came down the back straightaway, and honestly, it was like a bomb went off. I mean, there was stuff everywhere. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is not good." I mean, obviously, you don't know what exactly happened, and but this and that, but it's devastating. We lost. We were flying in those days. I mean, we had a lot of horsepower. We had almost 1,000 horsepower. If you look back, and those are the days with a Hanford wing. Well, that was 99, but 98, 90, in those days, we had a lot of horsepower. And, it was dangerous. I mean, it was probably one of the more dangerous eras, recent eras in IndyCar. We're running over 240 miles an hour, and at Fontana and some of the other places. So it was exciting. It was fun, but I think we lost Greg Moore. We lost a kid that was driving for Penske at Laguna Seca. Um,
I think
but I'm
Scott
not
Brayton at Indy, even though that
Scott
was,
Briggs. Yeah,
Iron.
that was a
Yeah.
different. Yeah, so it was a dangerous time, and again, I think the halo. Maybe if Greg would have had the halo, maybe it would have helped him. Although I just spent probably a week or so with him in Vegas, and we were becoming good friends, and he was a really good guy. We started in the back of the race at Fontana, and he was just slicing and dicing through traffic, and I was just kind of cruising through this 500-mile race, and I was like, he's gonna get himself in trouble, because I mean he was really like moving hard, and all of a sudden he spun down through the infield, and I kind of laughed. I go, well, there he is. He got himself in trouble, right? Because he just got loose off too, and didn't really think much of it, to be honest with you. We had a lengthy yellow while they cleaned up the vest. We didn't know anything went on, and we obviously finished the race. And then when the checker came out, we told us, and I think it was devastating. But we couldn't see that far over there where he crashed. But the halo could have helped him possibly. I mean, I think it was a pretty big hit, but I think that, like you said, with the halo, it's nothing but good for the drivers.
Yeah, when you after an accident like Jeff's or Greg's, how hard is it for you to get back in the car the next race and give 100%?
I think it's tough. It goes through your mind. You have to obviously as race car drivers, we're a little bit more calloused, and um, you always don't think, "Hey, it's gonna happen to me." We all want to do this. We all signed up for it. We don't want to die doing it. Um, but um, it's hard. You think about it. It's stuff that sticks in your memory, and especially when you knew them and they were friends and or teammates, as Jeff was Krosnoff, and then it just you got to kind of look back and analyze it and kind of see what caused that in order to not have the same mistake twice.
Yeah. Well, so, you guys get through the 96 season, your first year in the Eagle chassis, and then you switched actually to a Reynard chassis for the 97 season, if I'm not mistaken. Was there a reason for that? And did you personally prefer the switch to Reynard, or what was your thought process there?
Well, I did. I mean, obviously, all the races were being won by Reynard. Um, I think that Gurney his philosophy really was, I would rather not race than race somebody else's chassis. But we were begging. At that point, I think Juan was done. He had had enough, and so I think I got um, Alex Barron, and we were begging for some help. I mean, we just couldn't run with being downforce, shy downforce, tire and motor, and not to mention, I felt that if we had Reynards and we had the data that they could go back and build a better Eagle, and that was really the goal. But that made us a lot more competitive when we got the Reynards, and we were happy about that. Not that we didn't want to develop our own cars or with Dan, and not that we didn't want to be part of that. It's just that we needed to give the engineering side some opportunities to develop a car that was competitive. So,
Yeah, and you had some signs of competitiveness in that 97 season specifically. I think you got a top 10 at the end race there in Fontana, 2 mile super speedway. Did you prefer big tracks like Fontana? I mean, that it wasn't like one of those races where it rained and by circumstance you
right,
got up there. I
right.
mean, it's like
I
you
like,
raced your way doing all.
I liked them all. Obviously we dominated. We dominated in a road course era, or series at GTP. I grew up driving midgets and sprint cars and, had a lot of success there. So I was versed on either or. I did like the ovals because I felt that all the Euros and stuff weren't quite as good on the ovals, especially at the beginning. And obviously they learn it and they become very good. But I felt like maybe I had a little bit more of an advantage on some guys on the ovals. Um, and I like searching around for grip and that kind of stuff. And so I didn't mind either way. I like the going back and forth and running a road course this week, running an oval next week. I like that a lot. So um, I think I like the natural road courses more than say the street races, but the venues were great on the street races. So, but that was what's so great about IndyCar. You're a natural road course, you're a street track, you're on an oval, a super speedway, a short oval. So I think that's one thing, I really, when IRL started, I told Tony George, I said, you put the Silver Crown Dirt Series in this, and I'd be all in. Run about 4 dirt races, and I think that would have been a great mix to run a little bit of dirt, IndyCar on the road courses, the ovals, and the natural road courses.
Was there any track that you absolutely just hated going to?
You know, not, Nazareth was just not my fit. It was fun. It was like, I kind of dreaded go to Nazareth all the time. It was always gloomy and just wasn't like the place that you really liked, but I didn't mind the racetrack so much. And I always had a lot of success there. I was
Yeah.
always fast there. And, So, that was one that I was like, okay, it's not one of the best. And then there was a few of the street circuits that were just so tight and you just really couldn't race good. And but I loved all the, Laguna Secas. I like the St. Louis Oval. There wasn't too many places that I didn't care for. I really liked most of the places I was pretty excited about going to.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes IndyCar one of the best series in the world, right? Because of the diversity in the circuits. I want to go back to something you brought up earlier. You brought up the Hanford device. And I guess for anyone that may not know what that is, it was, I guess, a mechanism that was put on the rear wing to slow the cars down. And I think about 1998, specifically on Michigan and the California Motor
Montana.
Speedway. Because
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think it might have created some additional passing, if you will. What was your thoughts on the Hanford device? Did you feel it was safe? And, just in general, did you like having it, or what was your preference?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. It was like drafting a house. I mean, when you could be a straightaway behind somebody, and all of a sudden you'd run out of gears, trying to shift up because you'd be running, 230 or whatever by yourself, 235 down the straightaway, whatever, and you get that draft behind the Hanford device, and you're running two high 240s, and you're just shifting, boom, 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 and uh it was crazy. But yeah, I thought it helped the racing a little bit. There was pros and cons of it. I think they tried to run it on some other shorter ovals, and I don't think it worked out as well there, if I remember right. But on the Fontana and the bigger tracks, I thought it was pretty cool.
Gotcha. And then, I mean, you talked about it a little bit earlier, but towards the end of the '98 season, I think you left early. I think you were frustrated with just kind of the lack of, I guess, improvement in the environment with Toyota, for lack of a better summation of your comments. So, how early were you talking to the Pat Patrick team about switching over for the 1999 season? Was that after the season had ended, or did you kind of know midway through that that's the direction you wanted to go in?
Well, what happened was, and I haven't told this story very many times, but um, Dan was very sensitive to his cars, and rightfully so in some ways. And here we're frustrated race drivers, and remember we are testing at Elkhart Lake, and I'm going back. The new Eagle came, right, which was a huge improvement. I mean, it really did a huge improvement. It wasn't perfect, but it was much more closer to a Reynard. So we had both cars, and we were going back and forth, and I was faster in the Reynard than I was the Eagle, which doesn't always go well with Dan, So but he wants to know, well, okay, why are you faster in this car and not this car? And I kind of went through it, very uh objectively, right? Because I was pro Eagle, and I was the number one driver at that point. As Alex had just gotten there, and when I say number one, he was very fair to his drivers, but I was getting the number one engine, whatever, because Toyota couldn't produce the same, they couldn't produce enough of the newer stuff at the same time, right? And and I just told him, this is why I'm faster. I can go flat in the kink with this car, the Reynard, but I can't do it with the Eagle, and blah blah blah. We just went back and forth, back and forth, and I really didn't think much of it. But for some reason, I pissed him right off, and all of a sudden, I never got to see the Eagle again, and he kind of just fluffed me aside, and then moved Alex in. And so I was like, well, okay. And then they started talking to me. Patrick started talking to me about the same time. And I was like, well, I'm out of here. If that's the way it is, I'm leaving. And and so that's what happened. And then when that got announced at the last, whatever, before the last race, or this towards the end of the season, 98, Tan was like, I don't need you anymore. And we don't need to have you at the next race. So that's kind of got it. He probably got his feelings hurt a little bit. I got my feelings hurt a little bit. But I needed at that point in my career, I felt like I needed to commit competitive equipment. And Ray Hall had talked to me about a year earlier. I should have jumped at that opportunity. Um, but I'm kind of loyalist a little bit, which probably didn't do my career well. I was, Dan had been really good to me and the team and Toyota. But again, when things started falling apart and we're not competitive, and then everybody's pointing fingers at everybody, things definitely go bad, and so that's kind of what happened. And so unfortunately, I probably chose the wrong team to go to next, but um, it is what it is. You make those decisions, and then and I was struggling a little bit in the cockpit of the cars. If I had paddle shifts, I would have been much better. But and at Patrick, we had some success. I mean, I was in the Swift, and the Swift just wasn't as good. I could get it to work in some places, like at Nazareth, we finished second, right? I mean, we were really good, and there's some places that we were okay with it, and but it wasn't a Reynard. A Reynard was always good, and Adrian Fernandez was my teammate. He was bringing his money, and he told Patrick, "I'm not driving." About 4 races in, you get me a Swift, or I'm not coming. We're not. I'm not making the next payment, or whatever it was. And so he goes on and gets it. So now we have a team with one guy in a Swift and one guy in a Reynard, which is a total disaster. And so the development doesn't go as good. And so my side was struggling. And, we had very, limited success. Um, I was disenchanted with the whole thing. I didn't get along with Jim McGee. He was just, he just wasn't wasn't good to me. And I think he has that reputation. I got along with most everybody else, but he'd been with my dad and pretty much had the same issues, at the VPJ team. And I was done with him. And, um, it went from bad to worse. Then Adrian gets hurt somewhere. I think, I can't remember where he got hurt. He hurt his back or something like that. And Adrian stepped up and said, "Hey, I want PJ in my car." And so I got in his car, and right away I was competitive. I think we qualified second at Vancouver. Um, and I'm not sure the results of the thing that we didn't win, but we were competitive. We were on the hunt, but I couldn't make the Swift go, and then I was already disenchanted with this whole thing, so I was like, I'm going to NASCAR and move on, because and IndyCar in those days weren't in a very good place. Here we're trying to run a race and not the Indy 500. Um, carts falling apart. Even my dad's in my ear. They're not going to survive. The IRL is going to win. And it was disenchanting to have your dreams in IndyCar, and this is what you want to do, and the whole thing is just collapsing.
Gotcha. I think you just answered like my next 4 questions,
Yeah.
so we're on the same page. So you mentioned you went to NASCAR, but then I think some opportunities, specifically Indy 500 opportunities, opened themselves up to you. I think maybe help me with the dates. I think 2004. I think you replaced Buddy Lazier in the Menards car for an attempt. Am I wrong there?
That was 2002.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, 2002. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk me through that. How'd that come to be? And unfortunately, I think you suffered some injuries.
I did. Yeah. That was like one of the only times I got hurt in a race car at that point. And they'd had a string of bad luck, Menard did. And so he basically, I think, got hurt the race before the Indy 500, but he did. And so they called me and say, "Hey, would you want to come and drive at the Indy 500?" And I felt like, I think I'd already run one race with Beck or something like that. But at that point, my IndyCar career, I was over in stock car land, and I knew that if I was going to go to IndyCar or get to race the Indy 500, that I needed to do something. So I think I did a race with, let's see, that would have been 99. Yeah. So maybe it was the first one, or with Beck. I can't remember the whole thing, but, when Menard called, I jumped at it. I thought, oh, okay, it's pretty good. Didn't have the motor in it that probably you'd really want, but they were doing their own, and they were running Buicks, I think it was at the time, and it was fast. I mean, don't get me wrong, it just the reliability wasn't quite there. Um, but car was fast. I jumped right in it, and right off the big get-go, we're fast. I mean, we're top of the board I mean, not top, but we're in the top 5 every every day. I mean, we're right top 10, top 5, and we're good, right? And I think the day that I got hurt, the day I got hurt, I was sick. That night before, I was sick in the dock. I was staying in the Speedway Motel. We feel like maybe it might have had a mold problem in there, and something happened. I got really sick. I was at a fever. I had the chills. I was, I think I was throwing up. I was not good. So I wake up the next day, or the day I got hurt, and it's raining. And I think, oh, thank God, right? And so I go back to sleep, kind of get more rest. The team calls me about noon. Hey, it looks like the track's going to dry. We'd like to get out early, later in the afternoon. They came pick me up. I told them I'm not good, and they get me some lunch and kind of doctor me up a little bit. I get in the car, boom, fast. I mean, we were top of the board. And all day long we were 1, 2, or 3. I mean, we were just 1, 2. Well, I'd been in there for about 3 hours, and I'm like, I said, I'm done. I'm done physically. I'm done. I need to get out. I want to be done for the day. And they're like, oh, can you just do one more run for us? We'd like to put some new tires on it, and see, kind of a qualifying sim. And I'm like, I'm third quick right now. If I put tires on the sound, we go right to the top. And I was like, okay, right. Well, we had some things happen where we had too much front wing in it. We didn't get the tire pressures quite right. I'm not 100% by any means. And I'd been leaving the pits and pretty much going wide open. I mean, it was easy. And I got down into turn 1 on the start of the first qualifying lap sim. And this thing just, I mean, it's nothing that it had done, all the first 2 or 3 days. And it just had too much, I think the aero balance was way forward, tire pressures weren't right. I'm not good, and this thing just spits me right out, and boom, in the fence. Hits backwards hard. First, I think I was the first one to hit the safer barrier, but it stuck the gearbox in the barrier. So it kind of grabbed it. And then it slung me across the track, and I hit the inside barrier head on. And it knocks the wind out of me. So I'm sitting there, gasping for air, and they get to me. Obviously, they're so good there. They get to you before you even stop sliding. And I can't breathe, and I pass out, right? I mean, instantly. And man, they're trying to tube me and all this stuff. And I kind of wake up. I'm like, time out. I said, I don't have a confession. I said, I couldn't get my breath, so I passed out. I got blood coming out my nose where they were trying to tube me, and they get me out of the car, and they go, is anything hurt? And I go, no, I don't think so. But I said, I know that we had bad reputation for my neck. I hit big, so I was like, check my neck, just make sure I'm okay. So they put me on a backboard. They take me down to Methodist, and sure enough, I have a compression fracture of 4 and 5, and boom, that ends that program. I walk around with a halo for 12 weeks, and that was the same. Yeah, so that was the same. So 12 weeks was over, I was good to go race anywhere, and I went and drove AJ's stock car and finished 4th at Watkins Glen. So, that was the ending of that story. But yeah, it was very disappointing, because I thought that was my one really good chance to have a good finish at the Indy 500, or a competitive opportunity.
And how important, I mean, I'm assuming given your dad's history, it was important for you to take an attempt at Indy, because you did go back. I think you raced at least twice, where you made it and participated. So how important was Indy to get back to it after your injury? And what was your experience once you actually got to race?
It was, unfortunately, I had at that time, there just wasn't a lot of opportunities and I wasn't a regular IndyCar guy at that point. And I missed Indy at my heyday, when I was the best. And, '02, I felt I was pretty good, 'cause I was only 2 years out, of driving, IndyCar. I ran in '99, so I'd only missed a year really. But, and then I went with Beck and he's trying really hard and, a great guy, but just didn't have the equipment or the money to really put a good car. And then the other effort I had it was not good either. So it was unfortunate. But, in those days with sponsorship and all that, that's all we could put together. And so I just didn't get any really good opportunities there that I felt like I really wanted. I really felt like we could have been pretty good there. Um, and when I had a competitive car, I was good. So unfortunately, I didn't get to show anybody that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess as we start to wrap up here, I mean, certainly, I mean, you had a lot to overcome in your IndyCar career. However, is there anything you look back on that you're really proud of, specifically any specific moments where you're really proud of it
Well, I
for
think,
open wheel specifically?
yeah, I mean, I think the second place and, racing, trying to catch Montoya, there was good after I spun in traffic. I got held up in traffic. I lifted real quick in the kink and because the car was a slower car. And so I was lucky. But I was happy with that moment. I felt like, okay, we're getting some momentum now. Um, Scoring the points for Toyota, I think was pretty cool, and driving for Dan. Driving for Dan was pretty neat. I mean, when it was good, it was good. Um, Going to Indy and driving for Menard, and being fast and being quick and, unfortunately not getting an opportunity to really show that. But there was a lot of, small, I think successes, that you look down and go, okay, we got this, we can do this. And qualifying second at Vancouver, in Adrian's car. I think that was really good. That was fun. And you traveled like in those days we traveled to Brazil and Japan and Australia, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed IndyCar. I mean, I always tell somebody if I'm going to start a race team these days, I would start an IndyCar team. I That's where my heart is, I think, and that's where I like the paddock there, and I like the people, and I'd like to get some more American guys in there, but I think if that's where my allegiance is, I think more than anything.
I love it. And if a young driver came to you today and was talking about the wanting or desiring to get into IndyCar, what's a piece of advice you would give them?
Make sure you have a big checkbook. I mean, that's unfortunately our sport is not, from that standpoint, is not in a very good situation, right? In all motorsports, really, is very difficult to find the dollars. Um, yeah, I mean, that's number one. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you can't, get through those kind of challenges. I mean, I have a son that was trying to race Indy Lights and didn't have the proper budget, didn't, wasn't with the best team. And, it's just really hard to make it these days if you don't have the financial backing.
Gotcha. Well, PJ, this was an awesome interview. I appreciate how candid you were and just really enjoyed the discussion. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed being on.